So I was going to make a proper video out of this, but as things are moving very quickly, we're just going to go with a vlog for the moment. So as of recording this video, Russia has recognized both Donbass republics. They've announced basically a guarantee of independence of them. Zelensky has fled the country. It looks like things could go hot at any moment. A lot of people think Russia's going to invade. By the time you watch this video, we'll probably know one way or another. So on the surface, the narrative is Putin wants to rebuild the Soviet Union. He wants to rebuild the Russian Empire, all that sort of thing. And it's pretty much an imperialism bad, Putin's neo-KGB, that kind of thing. And that narrative is being pushed by both some pro-Russia people, but mainly the anti-Russia people. So that's the surface. There's some other stuff that's also on the surface, but a little more difficult to really... that defies kind of easy explanation. So what's kind of been a red flag for me during this is a couple days ago, there was an alleged attack on the Donbass region. Now, the Russians claim it was the Ukraine. The Ukraine and Western countries claim that it was Russia doing a false flag. We'll get into that in a minute. There isn't a dispute that several hundred artillery rounds were fired at the Donbass region. There were reports that Ukrainian forces were invading the area and that there was an APC that went into Russian territory proper and the Russians blew it up, killing 5 or 6 Ukrainian soldiers. So it does seem that there was some sort of fighting and there was artillery. So there is something to it. Now the question is, why would the Ukraine, when Russia's basically fully mobilized, they're ready to invade at a moment's notice, the whole situation is completely fucked. Why are they trying to provoke the bear? Why are they poking the bear? And that's something that's kind of hard to determine. So I've kind of come up with a couple different theories as to what happened. I'm not really partial to any of them over the others, but we'll go through them. So the first theory is that this is a pure false flag. That Russian or Donbass militia units shelled their own territory. Maybe they went to the Ukrainian side of the border and did it, and it was just to provide a context for invasion. There's a lot of precedent for this. I forget, there's that ship that blew up to start the Spanish-American War. The Germans in both world wars did like a really lame false flag to try to justify it. That's pretty common. The situation is so fluid and so messed up on the ground. It's kind of hard to really make any kind of conclusion. So that's quite possible. Second is that the Ukrainian army has been infiltrated heavily by Russian agents and Russian sympathizers, and someone in it gave the order to provide a pretext for Russian invasion. So in this scenario, it's Russian instigated like in the first one, but it was actually Ukrainian army units who did it under the direction of Russian infiltrators. And given how chaotic and fluid the situation is, it probably wouldn't be too hard for a junior officer to order an artillery barrage or a limited offensive or something like that. So that's number 2. Number 3 is some element of the army or Ukrainian government, maybe some nationalists or rogue elements or people who think that the only chance Ukraine has is to launch a preemptive attack before Russia's fully ready, ordered this. That they either blinded by patriotic fervor thought they stood a chance, or they think this is a Hail Mary and this is the best they have, or it's just general confusion and some orders got misplaced or something like that. But Russia's not directly involved, only the Ukraine is involved. But the Ukrainian government isn't directly necessarily Zelensky in the central government. The final possibility, assuming, I guess a fifth would be this is all just fake news and none of this actually happened and everybody's lying, which is very plausible, is that the United States, NATO, or the EU made promises to the Ukraine behind the scenes that they were going to provide them with military aid or come to their aid, or somehow are blackmailing or just calling in favors with Zelensky and they got him to do this, and that the Ukrainian government was directly involved, and the US, NATO, and the EU are trying to do this. So I think those are the main options, other than this whole thing just being completely fabricated, which once again is a distinct possibility. I mean, well, I guess there's evidence of it, but who even knows what's going on the ground at the moment. So that is number one. Now let's talk a bit more about the motivations of people involved in this. So you can take either a pro-Russia or pro-America side, but let's just look at the realities of the situation. Russia, I think, is under a lot of pressure, and they feel like, for lack of a better metaphor, they're a cornered bear. If you look at it over the last decade or two, you've had a colored revolution in Ukraine, Armenia, Georgia. They attempted to have one in Kazakhstan. I think Kyrgyzstan had one, or I don't know, one of the stands. Belarus, they've attempted multiple ones. I think there was one in Moldova. There was one, if you count Syria, because Syria is a Russian ally, then there was a revolution in Syria in the form of the Syrian opposition. You also have the bulldozer revolution in Serbia, which is another, from my understanding, Russian ally. So basically on the European front, the Caucasus front, and the Central Asian front, you have had Western powers trying to overthrow the pro-Russian governments and impose anti-Russian governments, which basically just surrounds the country and makes it completely cut off from the outside world. And a lot of these have happened in the last year or two. And I guess the big three you could say would be the Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan. And in the last year, there's been an attempt at Belarus, there's been an attempt at Kazakhstan, Armenia had a colored revolution, and it's really narrowing in on them. And Russia might feel like, okay, we need to get some breathing room, we need some buffer territory, we're just kind of fucked, and we need to do a YOLO offensive and try to do something with one of the fronts that we're stuck on. And that this is the best. Other people suggest that the US is looking extremely weak. It has low prestige because of the whole Afghanistan thing. Biden's presidency is a mess. So that's kind of, I think, the Russian perspective. Now, and I don't think that's really arguable. I think that's pretty factual, basic, realpolitik. Now, the more interesting side is the American side. So I have kind of a hot take that I haven't seen a lot of people say. I think America wants a war in the Ukraine. I think they've been escalating it as much as possible. I don't know if the colored revolutions were an attempt to stoke one, but I feel like they have kind of behind the scenes, or in front of the scenes, have been trying to get Russia to invade the Ukraine. Now, why do they want this to happen? Why do they want this? I think because Biden's presidency is in the shit. His approval rating's horrible. I've never in my lifetime of following polls seen the Republicans at a ballot advantage. Even if they win a majority in the House, it always is like Democrat plus 5, 6, 10. It's not like Republican plus 5. There's not that many Senate seats up, but it looks like it's going to be an unmitigated disaster when the midterm elections happen. Biden's approval ratings in the dirt, and I think this could just be a desperate attempt to start a war. Not necessarily, I don't think America necessarily wants to get involved in the war directly, but just to have Russia invade so there's a threat, so there can be some national unity. Because generally speaking, presidents' approval ratings go up quite a bit, and people are unwilling to have a change in government, to have electoral instability when you're in the middle of a war or a crisis. I think Bush had the highest ever recorded approval rating of a president, I could be wrong, after 9/11. So I think that could very well be the case. I think Biden's been trying to bait Russia with a combination of being aggressive with colored revolutions while also saying that they're not going to militarily defend the Ukraine. I think there's a small chance, and this is partially because Biden has dementia, and he's completely unpredictable. And oftentimes, a lot of people with dementia just act in a very erratic way, that he might try to make it a hot or proxy war with Russia, where maybe the U.S. bombs Donbass militias or something like that. But I think more likely that he just wants a war in the Ukraine so he can demagogue on it, portray Russia as the main enemy, and just kind of go down that pathway to save the complete and utter disaster that his presidency's become. So that's my theory. There's also the theory that Biden doesn't want a war, and this is all just a result of things that have been set in motion, that Russia feels cornered, that he might not have wanted this outcome, but his actions created this. And it's very clear that his actions were going to create this, but they decided to just go in and use COVID as an opportunity to try to overthrow the remaining pro-Russian governments and further isolate Russia. I've heard rumors that a lot of the pro-China countries in Asia are thinking of switching to be pro-Russia instead. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but that's my take on it. Hopefully you agree or find my analysis interesting at least. God bless everybody. We'll see soon.